I made a big mistake, which is that I prepared well in advance for this. And of course, since I prepared, the topic on ethics in publishing has surfaced, which is the Hachette-Amazon dispute, which I will get to at the end. And I'm going to talk fast, because I'm going to get through the part that I'd originally prepared in order to get to that at the end. What I was originally going to talk about, which fits into this, is the ethics of the changing publisher-author relationship and the ethics of the publisher's attempts to impose agency pricing and the practical effect of the government's challenge that stopped them. So, how it's always been is that an author could not reach an audience without a publisher, a book publisher, a newspaper publisher, a magazine publisher, some publisher, to take what the author had done and get it to an audience. So business practices and rules for book publishing grew up around that reality. The book publishers paid in advance, or the book wouldn't get written. The book publishers generally would own an interest in all the rights except the cinematic rights. That was the normal convention. And the book publishers generally vended all the rights. They sold all the rights except the cinematic rights. They accounted to the authors for the sales on a big delay. In other words, the sales from January to June were accounted for the following October. And of course, that was for their convenience and the convenience of accounting departments in the days before computers, but it wasn't bad for the cash flow either. They tried, in their contracts, to get a perpetual option on the author's next book. Agents sort of slowed that down, but that was the standard. Because of the fact that the publisher was taking a risk and sharing the rewards, the publishers controlled the timing of everything. So if they didn't have too many books happening at one time, this would overwhelm their staff, the authors would accept that the publishers controlled the timing. And the author's only responsibilities, really, were to turn in the manuscript and read the proofs to make sure that the typesetting had not done violence to the manuscript. The core requirement for the publisher in trade book business was to put the books in stores. And everything else followed from that. So what the ethical requirements for the publisher were in this time, which has only been gone for about 15 minutes, but is pretty much gone, was to edit the book well, to put it in stores, to market it effectively without expecting any help from the author, and to generate an honest accounting and pay the royalties as the contract stipulated. That was pretty much the border of a publisher's ethical responsibility. Now, authors can reach audiences without a publisher for a piece of writing of any length or for any interest group. So new practices have grown up around this new reality. Authors can choose to get a higher share of the revenue if they trade off the advance, that is, they don't work with a publisher, and they do some of the work that a publisher would have done. Authors can exploit some of the rights themselves and sell other rights to others. There's a rather famous case at the moment of a guy named Hugh Howey, who has written a bestseller called Wool. And Hugh Howey self-published Wool and found great success on Amazon doing that. And he was making $50,000 a month on Amazon. And the U.S. publishers were offering him $300,000, which didn't seem to him like a deal worth taking, so he didn't take it. Meanwhile, his agent sold rights in 10 countries and sold the movie rights before a U.S. publisher made any kind of deal with him. That is now possible. It was not possible, it's like 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Authors who self-publish are paid almost immediately on their sales. They don't wait for an accounting. Amazon writes them a check once a month, as many of these self-publishing venues do. Authors don't have to be limited in what they publish, or the length of it, or how fast they get it out. They are in control of that process. Authors can be effective marketers. They have to be if they self-publish. But now, publishers are expecting them to apply marketing efforts to the published books as well. And stores are less important than they used to be. they're less important every day than they were the day before. So this actually drives a lot of the change, because the most important thing that publishers did in the past was put the books in the stores. And if there are no stores, that undercuts the important thing they do. So there are new ethical requirements for a publisher considering these new realities. They have to learn how to provide marketing help in the digital realm at scale. And the reason I say at scale is if all it's about is elbow grease, the author can apply his own elbow grease. The publisher needs to be able to do things that they are unable to do because they have 10 authors or 100 authors that otherwise would not be possible, or they're not adding value as a publisher. They have to account more frequently and transparently, even if they don't pay, even if they don't change the fact that they pay twice a year. There's no reason in the modern era to tell an author about 6 months of sales on a 4-month delay, which is 10 months late on the sales in the beginning of that period. In the age of computers, there's really no excuse for that, and it's borderline unethical, but it is the standard practice. It is not, the ethics have not caught up with the change. And at the very least, the publishers need to allow, and at the best case, they would enable authors to publish shorter and more frequent content. Publishers they didn't want books by authors bumping into each other. They wanted books to have room to be able to exploit each book to the maximum. But authors want to write in a timely manner. And in this day and age, authors can do that on their own. So publishers are really not doing well by the author if they block them, if they stop them, which they still do. Another component of this is authors have online identities. Publishers need to exploit authors' online identities, but they have to not take them over and own them, because publisher-author relationships are temporary. Authors will go through several publishers. They don't want a publisher controlling their online identity. And publishers have never really promoted the backlist. That is, the books that were published 6 months, a year, 5 years, or 10 years ago. Self-publishing authors promote their backlist. So if publishers want to be doing the job for authors that authors do for themselves, they have to promote the backlist. So these are changes which I think publishers are gradually coming to. The big publishers are all sort of acknowledging that they need to have sensitivity to these changes and be more proactive at being helpful to authors. But the practices of 100 years take a long time to change. And in fact, there are what amount to unethical practices taking place today because the circumstances have changed faster than the practices. Now I want to talk a little bit about agency pricing. The core proposition, the point to agency pricing, the point is that the book will be the same, the e-book will be the same price no matter what retailer you buy it from. The justification is the retailer is not selling you the book. The publisher is selling you the book. They are using the retailer as an agent to execute the transaction and interact with you for that sale. But the publisher is selling the book. Therefore, it's totally rational that the publisher establishes the same price through all the various channels. There are certain requirements to this. So, for example, now the publisher is responsible for the sales tax. That's a trivial problem if you're Random House. It's not a trivial problem if you do 10 books a year and you have a $400,000 a year company. If this were implemented properly across most publishers, what it would prevent is a particularly deep-pocketed retailer, whose name might be Amazon, from discounting to the extent that it takes all the oxygen out of the room for everybody else. A likely byproduct of agency pricing would be to keep the prices of books higher than they would otherwise be. But it is important to know, and could be lost in the discussions that we've had, that the contractually stipulated prices in agency were maximums. They weren't minimums. The publisher was always free to lower prices for competitive or promotional reasons, and would have if the agency agreements had been allowed to go forward the way they were negotiated. This got publishers away. What publishers did originally with ebooks was treat them like print books. So they used what's called a buy-sell model or a wholesale model. Now, a wholesale model for print means the store or the wholesaler actually buys the books and pays for the books without regard to when they sell the books on to the customer. Now, they are allowed to return them, and they can get their money back. But in the meantime, the store has an investment in an ebook. There is no investment in ebooks. There is no inventory in ebooks. So the model that was set up for print books actually doesn't make any sense for ebooks, and the margins that were set up for print books, which are supposed to cover the store for making an investment, for having to pay to put books on shelves, to have to maintain the shelves, to maybe have to send the books back, those margins were wildly excessive in the ebook era. So the result, one of the things that's inevitable, if you give a retailer more margin than they need, they will give it away to get market share. It has been that way at least for 100 years in this country. And that's exactly, as soon as ebooks passed from being Palm and Sony, who are not really retailers, to being Amazon, which is a retailer, the first thing they want to do is cut the prices. They don't need all the 50% margin, okay? And they wanted market share. And in fact, they wanted to build up the Kindle business before anybody else got into the Kindle business. So what this meant was that the retailers were voluntarily giving away this excess margin to cut the prices, and the prices became unrealistic. Now this, from the publisher's point of view, had a secondary problem, which is they're trying to keep the print book network alive. Print books can't be cut in price. There's a level below which you can't go. They're physical books you have to manufacture, you have to ship them around, you have to warehouse them. There are irreducible minimums to what the price can be. They don't want ebooks to be so much cheaper than print books, that print book purchasing is discouraged by price. Publishers wanted to maintain, if not parity, something closer to parity. Amazon doesn't care about that. Amazon wants people to buy online. They don't care what you buy online. They want you to buy online, not in a store. If you do that, Amazon wins. So what happened when the publishers implemented agency was that the government stopped. And they stopped it blaming collusion, blaming the note, alleging that the 5 publishers that implemented agency had banded together to do it with Apple, that this constituted an illegal act. And therefore, the government mandated that there be a settlement, which, one of the features of which was that even though the publishers could keep the agency pricing, the stores were allowed to discount off the agency pricing. Well, that defeated the whole point of agency. And with that, so it was nice that the publishers reduced the share from 50% in wholesale to 30% in agency, and they, of course, reduced the price that they based it on at the same time. But they lost what they were really going for, which was to create a level pricing across retailers so that one retailer would not be advantaged over the others by having deeper pockets. The net result of this, as I'm about to explain, is that 2 companies are advantaged and everybody else is disadvantaged. Amazon is advantaged because they're the biggest retailer, and Penguin Random House is advantaged because they're the biggest publisher. And everybody else is not. Now, this takes us to the Hachette-Amazon dispute, which would not be playing out this way if the Justice Department had not done anything over the last 3 years. It would be different. But as a result of the Justice Department doing what it did, Amazon's market share for ebooks, which had been diminishing, rose back up. And they are now 70 or 80, between 70 and 75% of the ebook market. The core thing, now I'm going to shift here and talk about the Amazon Hachette situation and what I think brought it on and what, unfortunately, how little can be done about it. Amazon changed the economics of the book business. And they changed the economics of the book business because they don't really need to make money on the book business. The book business for Amazon is a customer acquisition tool. By having a book business as well run as they did, they brought in millions of people to buy books from them. And by the way, knew some things about those people, about the books that they bought. If you buy a book about how to decorate your living room, chances are you might be buying a carpet or a sofa as well. They didn't need to make much money on the books. They don't do them at a loss. They sell some books at a loss. They don't sell books in total as a loss. But they don't have to make much money on them because they make money on the lifetime value of the customer that the book business brings in. Well, Barnes & Noble doesn't do that. They can't do that. They don't have a way to make money. And the politics and pros can't do that. They have to make money on books. So if you have a competitor that doesn't have to make money on books, competing with all the people that do, there's a sort of inevitable result. And it's not a good one for the people that are trying to make money on books. Amazon is, depending on the book, depending on the publisher, 35 to 70% of the sales. That has never happened in the history of the book business before. No one account has ever been that substantial a percentage of the publisher's overall business. So that's unprecedented market power. And in fact, in 2009, one publisher, Hachette, sent lawyers to Washington to talk to the Justice Department and to tell them that Amazon was dangerously large. And they didn't get anywhere with the Justice Department. And in fact, the Justice Department basically said, no, we're not interested in that. But we are interested in this agency pricing and the 5 publishers getting together and setting the prices of the books across retailers. Now, I don't know if it's a coincidence that Hachette sent the lawyers to Washington in 2009 and that Hachette's the one in the meat grinder today. Might be a coincidence. Might just have to do with the timing of when Hachette's contract had to be renegotiated. But it's ironic if it's not coincidental. Now, there are some things, though, about this which are not being said, mostly because we're all mad at Amazon. But the fact is, Amazon is every publisher's most profitable account because they buy on more or less the same basis as all the other accounts do. They're massive, and they don't make a lot of returns. If you're stocking 1,000 stores and you make a mistake, a small mistake, and you have 6 copies when you should have had 2, you got 4 copies in 1,000 stores that have to go back. Amazon is not stocking 1,000 stores. They may be stocking more than one warehouse, but they're not stocking thousands of warehouses. So their ability to buy closer to what they're going to sell is much easier. They don't make the returns that the big guys do. Amazon does not want to be every publisher's most profitable account. That is not why they went into business. And when they see that they are, their pretty natural reaction is to say, hey, we're the most profitable account because we've invested in all these systems and we don't take that much margin. And we're responsible for the fact that we're selling all these books to all these people. And by the way, next point, they made the ebook business. The ebook business would not be what it is today if Amazon hadn't made the investments they made in Kindle, both in the hardware, but also driving all the publishers to put books into ebooks, which they weren't doing until Amazon said you really have to. And then all the screen real estate, which could have been dedicated to selling more books, or selling more sofas, or selling more dog food, which were dedicated to selling Kindles. And in the beginning, they didn't sell a lot of Kindles. but they made that market. So, from Amazon's point of view, we're the most profitable account. We made the ebook market. Damn right we're entitled to more than the other guys, right? And so it's easy enough to see the justification from their perspective. Now here's another thing that nobody says, but it's very uncomfortable truth. Amazon wants lower prices for the consumer. All the rest of us don't. Authors don't, agents don't, publishers don't, other retailers don't. At the very least, we want the prices maintained where they are. Actually, we kind of like it if they went back up a little bit. Amazon wants them lower. Okay, so that's a pretty difficult position to fight from. The problem is that lower prices for consumers is catnip for politicians. They cannot resist it. And it is not the only value in the world. There are other things besides lower prices for consumers. And when you are talking about physical goods, whether you're talking about a book or a sofa or dog food, you have to manufacture something. There is an irreducible minimum for each unit that you produce. There's no irreducible minimum for each unit of an ebook. Each unit of an ebook is free. So there is no protection. There's no point at which you can say, well, I'd be losing money if I sold it to you at that rate. So it's very, very difficult to resist the pressure from Amazon on any number of grounds. They are your biggest account. They are your most profitable account. They are selling stuff at lower prices to the consumers, and they created a lot of the market. However, they're bullying. It's clear that they're bullying. They're not going to be able to bully Random House like this. Random House is 5 times the size of a shed. So a shed is about 10%. Easy way to visualize it. The big 5 publishers are approximately 100% of the books that most people care about. There are exceptions. Harry Potter was published by Bloomsbury in the United States. That arises, but it's a safe enough rule. 99% of the books that people know about and care about come from 5 publishers. Of the 99%, of that 100%, 50% is Random House, 20% is HarperCollins, 10% each, Simon & Schuster, Macmillan, and Hachette. So Hachette is, you've been reading the literature. They're the weak gazelle. They are the one that the leopard can go after and get. And I'm sure that the idea is that they'll get terms from Hachette, and then they'll move on and get those same terms from Macmillan, and then they'll move on and get those same terms from Simon & Schuster, and then maybe they'll have the clout to pull something on HarperCollins. But you know what? Even if they do all of that, they ain't going to be able to do this to Random House. It's half the books. The audience would go nuts if they did this to Random House. So what does that mean? It means 3 years from now, Random House's margins are going to be better than all the other publishers. Right? So, hey, this isn't bad for them. Now, Random House already has the best organization, the deepest pockets, right? And now they're going to have a situation where they're going to be making more money on every book than everybody else is. All authors become free agents at some point. They have a 2-book contract, they have a 4-book contract, whatever it is, it comes to an end. When it comes to an end, anybody can sign them. Amazon is going to take down those other publishers one author at a time. And 5 or 10 years from now, they will be the only trade publisher because they have all the advantages. And it's going to be very, very difficult. The other publishers will say, but you'll be number 3 in our organization, you'll be number 38 with them. If the Random House is offering more money, and more money on every copy sold, it's going to be hard to make that argument and make it stick. So, so that's my sort of bottom line on the Amazon Hachette dispute. What should have been done was, when agency was implemented, Amazon said, okay, we'll do it for the big publishers, these big publishers. We won't give it to anybody else. Okay? Apple said, oh no, we only do agency. We don't know how to buy wholesale. We don't know how to discount books. That meant that if you weren't a big 5 publisher, you had to have one set of terms for Apple, and another way of doing business for Amazon with two different retail prices, because one of them was 30% off, one of them was 50% off. And basically they had 1 foot on the dock and 1 foot on the boat, and the boat was leaving, okay? And that's really the situation they were all pushed into. What the Justice Department should have said is, if you give agency terms to one, you must give agency terms to all. And that should have been the way to level the playing field among all the publishers, which would have allowed anybody who wanted to set prices throughout the ecosystem, and that would have solved the problem and not advantaged Amazon. But that's not what they did. So we are afraid going to have another round of Justice Department in this administration, or probably the next, when they realize that Amazon is 70% of the business, which they will be by 5 or 10 years from now, if nothing drastic changes. And Random House will be 70% of the books that matter, and the other publishers will be atrophying and combining but not competing with them. That does not strike me as an ethical situation. I'm not exactly sure who is responsible for the ethical breach. In any case, that's what I have. Do we have time for questions? In any case, if we have questions, I'd love to hear them.
Well, actually, I was wondering if you might explain, because I'm sure there are a lot of people in the room who don't totally understand what the renegotiation with Hachette and Amazon is.
What happened is that when the courts decided that the publishers were naughty, they imposed settlements. And the settlements were set up to be staggered in their expiration, so that not all the publishers came up at once, because after all, they collude, right? So Hachette, I believe, is the first one up. They have not, neither side has been particularly clear about the substance of the dispute. My understanding is that Amazon is pressuring for a substantial increase in the margin on the e-books. Substantial enough that one person told me it would take half of Hachette's profits. So it's sort of a deal that they can't afford to make. And that's the current dispute.
Yeah. There's a great article in the New York Times today about Michael Peach, the CEO of Hachette.
Yes.
They have to sign confidentiality agreements, so nothing is public. Officially, everything is conjecture on what the negotiations are about. But apparently, he has advised his entire staff not to speak to the public, and he isn't, which is really rare. I just thought that was an addition to a nice addition to.
Yeah, it's a horrible situation. I mean, I feel really, really bad for the people at Hachette, and they're all, you know, as I must say, across all these companies, it's a hell of a lot of really nice people, smart people in all of these companies, and including Amazon, for that matter, right? There are no idiots here, and everybody is doing what they think their company needs them to do. I really blame the government, not Amazon. This is a situation that could have been resolved if the government understood the business, and they didn't. And they treated the books like they were widgets, and they put everybody in this situation. But yeah, I can understand. You can understand certainly in this environment why anybody at Hachette would be extremely nervous about opening their mouth about anything, because there's so much at stake. I mean, literally, the company is at stake. Yeah.
So, I work at the APA, we just published the DSM, and last year we sold $40 million worth of DSMs. I would argue that Amazon is not our most profitable account. They're asking for a 45% discount, and it's only because we have Barnes & Noble and other medical wholesalers, and we also sell to individuals at 33% and 20% that we can afford to stay in business. If all of our books were sold at 45% discount plus author royalties, we would.
You know, actually, thank you very much for that. You're absolutely right. They are every trade publisher's most profitable account. And you're quite right that bullying the professional and academic publishers into trade terms makes them not the most profitable account to those publishers. And I appreciate the correction before I write the blog that says what I was going to say before. And you've just added a nuance that will make me accurate and will take away the value of the comment you could have made, but in any case, you've made it in advance. Thank you. You're right. Okay, well, yes.
Did you see Dennis Johnson's comment in the New York Times, which was, how can this not be illegal?
Yeah, well, the thing,
So
one,
from the ethics,
you know, the
it's
fact,
not
yeah,
illegal.
the fact is, the reason the reason I agree to speak here is because I consider myself reasonably capable of talking about what's ethical and not ethical. I have no clue what's legal or not legal. And in fact, you can you can see arguments. There was an article last week, I think it was Fortune or Money, I forget, which was basically saying that Amazon's overstepped their bounds. This is abuse of their position in the marketplace. Look, it certainly seems that way to me. On an ethical basis, it's certainly an abuse of their position in the marketplace. What the law says is something that lawyers and judges will have to try to figure out. The Justice Department was presumably enforcing the law. What they did was unethical, but it apparently was what the law required. So, you know, ethics and the law have an occasional agreement, but not a universal one. One more?
In France and Germany, prices are controlled by the publisher, by law.
Yes.
Do you believe that that's a better solution or a more ethical solution to this environment?
Well, it certainly has slowed Amazon down in both Germany and France, so I think that, and you're right. I mean, where there are price controls on books, it strengthens the publisher's position, and at the moment, anything that strengthens the publisher's position undercuts Amazon's position. Anyway, thank you very much.